Imagine being on an overnight flight to Hong Kong. The cabin is dark and most of the passengers are sleeping. Suddenly the plane starts making some strange maneuvers. It turns 90 degrees and flies on its side, then turns straight down, pressing you back with more than 4 Gs of force. After making some recovery, you're now in an unreal weightless freefall. If you didn't know better, you'd think a child was wildly playing with the controls. Unfortunately, in this case, you wouldn't be wrong. This is the fatal breakdown of the Aeroflot Flight 593 crash. In March of 1994, Aeroflot Flight 593 was traveling from Moscow to Hong Kong with a fairly routine flight plan. The 3 pilots would be rotating turns at the helm since this was a long flight. The captain of the group would finish his shift and move to the cabin for some rest. The relief pilot, Yaroslav Kudrinsky, took over as captain. His co-pilot was First Officer Igor Piskaryov. The 2 pilots had a combined 15,000 hours of flight time, including 1,400 hours in the A310. The Airbus A310-300 was a brand new advanced aircraft in the Aeroflot fleet. These pilots had the majority of their hours on Russian-made planes, which had slightly different standards on warnings and limits for operation. These subtle differences may have been the tragic difference between a miraculous recovery and a fiery crash. In addition to the pilot and co-pilot, there was actually a 3rd pilot in the cockpit that night. Vladimir Makarov was another Aeroflot pilot riding as a passenger on this flight. As a courtesy, he was allowed to sit in one of the jump seats behind the pilots. As the quiet of the overnight flight set in, the captain decided to allow a couple visitors into the cockpit. This unusual event was actually an exciting circumstance for Captain Kudrinsky. His children were on this flight since they were scheduled to have a short vacation together in Hong Kong. The plane was flying on autopilot. The course was set, and this was the uneventful portion of the flight for pilots. His 15-year-old son Eldar and 13-year-old daughter Yana entered the cockpit at 12:40 a.m. The initial banter revealed a proud father showing his complicated job as a commercial captain to his impressed children. After just a few minutes, Captain Kudrinsky steps out of his seat and Yana takes his place. The moment he removed his harness to stand, he should have transferred control of the plane to the co-pilot. At this point, Igor Piskarov had his seat pushed back in a relaxed position without really being able to reach all of the flight controls. If the captain had transferred control formally, Piskaryov would have moved his seat forward and placed his hands on the control wheel. It was a seemingly small error, but as we'll see, small errors can add up to be a huge mistake. As the captain moved out, he moved Yana in. It was a harmless exchange, considering the plane was on autopilot and it would allow her to get a closer look. She spent a few minutes looking around, asking a few questions and touching the control wheel. Her father suggested that she turn the wheel to the left and fly the plane. She did as he asked, and the plane quickly turned to the left. As a child, I'm sure the magical feeling of controlling this huge plane was thrilling, but Captain Kudrinsky had performed a little magic of his own. He quickly turned a knob to direct the plane to the left. He was following a procedure that he had performed hundreds of times. While the plane was in fact on autopilot, there are ways for the pilots to take control of one function or another. The captain pulled out the heading select knob and directed the plane to the left by 15 degrees. In simple terms, this meant that the wings would essentially dip 15 degrees on the left side, causing the plane to roll towards the left. In this case, the autopilot was still controlling the speed and altitude. It also still had the programmed route waiting to be resumed. As soon as the captain pushed the knob back in, the autopilot would resume the programmed heading and continue on with the planned flight. A pilot might use this function to direct the plane around a